I was told I wasn't polished enough. That was the exact phrase. No notes about my numbers, no mention of the 3 months I spent rebuilding the pricing model from scratch. Just that line, like a fingerprint I couldn't scrub off. It was 2:14 a.m. The office smelled like burnt coffee and recycled air. I was staring at the final version of a deck that no longer had my name on it. My initials, those two small letters I'd once been proud to see on the project files, had been replaced by Lauren M., the VP, the one who smiled like she was allergic to humility and spoke in buzzwords that left you both impressed and slightly nauseous. The email had landed a few hours earlier. Team, I'll be leading the presentation with the client tomorrow. Let's keep the lineup streamlined for optics. Appreciate everyone's prep. Streamlined for optics. That's corporate for we don't trust how you look when you talk. I leaned back in the chair. The hum of the ceiling lights made it sound like the building was breathing through its teeth. My reflection in the glass wall looked exhausted, shirt wrinkled, tie loosened, skin a shade too pale from weeks under artificial light. I wasn't executive Polish, whatever that meant. I was substance without shine. I recorded a voice memo to myself, something I did when the anxiety got too loud. You've been here before. Let them have the stage. You know the numbers. You know the system. The truth sells itself if you let it. I wanted to believe that. But truth doesn't always sell itself. It needs a voice. And mine had just been muted. When I first joined the company, I was the kid who stayed late. Not because anyone asked, but because I wanted to understand. Our platform was messy. Part cloud integration, part duct tape, all confusion. But I learned its heartbeat. I could debug it blindfolded. That's why the client, a logistics giant from Dallas, trusted me. I spoke their language, risk, uptime, ROI, not buzzwords. Now, as we prepared to renew and expand their contract, $1.2 million on the line, I was being told to sit quietly in the room. My manager, Greg, had tried to soften it. Look, you're a brilliant man, but Lauren's got the polish. We just need the executive presence tomorrow. It's not personal. Not personal. That phrase should be engraved on every corporate tombstone. Lauren had a way of turning preparation into theater. She rehearsed the deck like a TED Talk. Pause. Smile. Pivot. She asked me to dumb down the risk slide. Said it made us sound defensive. I argued that the CFO would ask about failure scenarios. She waved a manicured hand and said, "We'll handle that live." So I handled it silently. While she practiced hand gestures, I checked the API logs. Something was off. A timeout error had spiked in the past 12 hours. If the client's monitoring team noticed it, they'd grill us on reliability. I stayed another hour tracing it, line by line, until I found a missing parameter in the batch sync. It wasn't catastrophic, but it was enough to make us bleed credibility. By 3:30, I was alone on the floor. I fixed the bug, sent a quiet note to engineering, and stared at the presentation slide one last time. That's when I noticed it. Slide 47. Failure mitigation protocols. It was gone. Deleted. The only slide that could save us if the CFO asked what would happen when, not if, something broke. I checked version history. Lauren had removed it at 7:42 p.m. Reason, not visually aligned. I wanted to laugh, but it came out more like an exhale through clenched teeth. At 4 a.m., I shut the laptop and looked at the city outside, towers blinking like tired eyes. I thought about the client's procurement lead, a quiet man named Daniel, who never spoke in meetings until he had something final to say. He respected calm, facts, honesty. And here we were, about to give him optics. I poured what was left of the coffee into a paper cup, walked to the conference room, and taped a note inside my folder. If they ask about risk, skip the slide. Just tell the truth. Then I went home, showered, and sat in the dark kitchen until sunrise, rehearsing answers I might never get to give. The next morning I showed up anyway. No invite, no badge access to the presentation room. Lauren had streamlined that too. I stood behind the glass wall like a ghost, watching my own work walk away from me. Through the soundproof glass, I could see her smiling, gesturing, shining. The clients nodded, mostly out of politeness. Then Daniel, the quiet one, leaned forward and said something I couldn't hear. Lauren froze for a split second, eyes darting toward the missing slide. She smiled again, but it was thinner this time, and even from the hallway I could read her lips. She was improvising. I didn't hear the words, but I saw the CFO's expression harden, the kind of face that meant this isn't going well. I should have felt satisfied, vindicated even, but I didn't. All I felt was the weight of a team about to lose everything we'd built. The door opened halfway through the meeting. Greg stepped out, pale. He didn't look at me when he said, "They're asking for you?" He didn't need to. I was already walking in. They didn't invite me to the dinner. I invited their problem to find me. That night, after the meeting, the execs flew home on the company card. I stayed behind in Dallas because the client's systems were glitching again. Lauren called it a technical hiccup. I called it what it was, a warning. If they pulled the renewal over this, 12 people on my team would lose their jobs. At 10:47 p.m., sitting in a dim airport bar with my laptop open and a cheap whiskey sweating beside it, I got a message on Slack from someone I didn't expect. Tom Sanders, the client solutions architect, the one who'd been in the meeting, arms crossed, skeptical eyes that didn't blink much. "Tom, hey, I know this isn't official, but our sync API started throwing errors again after your update. Any idea what's happening?" Me: "Yeah, I think your load balancer's caching old requests. Can you give me shell access for 10 minutes? Tom: "You serious? You'll fix it from a bar?" Me: "You'll get your packets clean before your next beer gets warm." He sent me credentials. 40 minutes later, the error logs were clean. I patched the timeout issue, flushed the cache, and reloaded the dashboard. Green across the board. Tom: "Holy hell, you just did in 40 minutes what our vendor couldn't fix in 2 weeks. Me: "We're your vendor." Tom: "No, you're the only one who seems to care." That sentence stuck with me like static in my head. He asked if I was around for dinner. I said I wasn't on the guest list. He said, "Then we'll eat somewhere with no list." We grabbed burgers from a hole-in-the-wall joint, 2 blocks from his office, fluorescent lights, cracked leather booths, jukebox humming old Springsteen songs. He told me the CFO wasn't impressed with the pitch, that the woman leading it, Lauren, though he never said her name, danced around the hard questions. When we asked what happens if your system fails mid-cycle, Tom said, she smiled and said, "That's unlikely." That's not an answer. I laughed, but not because it was funny. That's because she deleted the slide that had the answer. He blinked, then leaned back. "You're kidding." I shook my head. He took a long sip of his drink, then said, "You realize you just told me more in 1 minute than she did in an hour?" We talked for another 2 hours, about systems, risk, how trust doesn't come from polish, but from scars. When I left, he said quietly, "You should have been in that room." I didn't sleep much. The next morning, I ironed the same shirt I'd worn the day before, brushed my hair back, and walked to the client's headquarters. The air was heavy, Texas heat pressing through glass. Inside the lobby, everything smelled like disinfectant and money. I wasn't technically invited to the follow-up session, but I walked in with a confidence I didn't feel. The receptionist gave me that look, the one people reserve for someone who doesn't belong, but acts like they do. I smiled and said, "Internal support, IT liaison." She buzzed me through. The boardroom was already set. 12 chairs, 1 projector, bottled water arranged like soldiers. Lauren stood near the front, immaculate in white, talking to the CFO, her hands slicing the air in practiced rhythm. I slipped into a corner chair, unnoticed at first. The meeting began with small talk, then numbers. When the CFO finally looked up, his tone changed. "We've seen the dashboards, impressive metrics, but tell me, if your core service fails at 2 a.m., what's the exposure window before we lose data integrity?" Lauren froze for a second, then smiled. We have a multi-regional redundancy protocol that the CFO cut her off. That's not what I asked. She glanced at Greg, who shifted in his seat. Silence thickened. Then Tom, sitting halfway down the table, spoke softly. Maybe we should let the engineer answer that. Lauren's jaw tightened. Greg looked like he wanted to evaporate. I straightened my back. The room turned toward me. Our recovery time objective is 15 minutes, I said. In practice, we average 9. The system fails silently. Oh, the customer wouldn't even notice. But if it fails catastrophically, we have a kill switch that isolates corrupted nodes and reroutes traffic in under a minute. You'd lose at most a transaction batch, not a dataset. The CFO leaned forward. And how do you know that? Because I built the first patch when it failed last year. Silence. Then, the smallest thing, a nod. You could feel the current shift in the room. Lauren tried to pivot back, smiling too wide. Exactly, and that's why our team structure? But the CFO wasn't listening to her anymore. Neither was Tom. They were looking at me, and for the first time in months, I didn't look away. The meeting wrapped 20 minutes later. No one said much afterward. As I packed my bag, Greg whispered, "What the hell was that?" I said, "The truth." Outside, the Texas air felt heavier but cleaner somehow. My phone buzzed. A message from Tom. "If we continue discussions, I want you in the room." 5 seconds later, another message came in. This one from Greg. "Pack up. Lauren says you're not needed tomorrow." I stared at both texts. 2 invitations. 2 very different rooms. I knew which one I was walking into next. At 7:12 a.m., I was uninvited. At 7:19, I booked a room across the street. The email came in while I was lacing my shoes. Subject line, "Restructure for tomorrow's client sync." 3 sentences, all polite poison. "Appreciate your contribution, but leadership has decided to simplify the roster for client visibility. Please stand by for updates." Simplify. Visibility. Corporate poetry for erase him quietly. I sat there for a moment, staring at the screen, letting the coffee go cold. Then I opened a map, searched the address of the client's HQ, and found a small business suite directly opposite their building. Booked it for the day. If they wanted me invisible, fine. I'd be invisible with Wi-Fi. By Apisti, I was across the street, laptop open, headset on. Through the window, I could see the reflection of their boardroom, like a movie playing silently across glass. Lauren would be rehearsing right now. The slow smile, the pause before the number, the careful eye contact with whoever she thought held the checkbook. My phone vibrated, a Slack notification, anonymous thread, the subject line, "Behavioral concerns, Thomas, AE." Someone had forwarded it to me by mistake. Brilliant, but reactive. Can come off defensive in client situations. Needs coaching on collaborative tone. I scrolled down and saw it. Lauren's signature. That one line, "can come off defensive," hit harder than anything else. It was a career landmine disguised as feedback. Once it's in your file, it sticks. You're no longer a person. You're a liability with potential. For a minute, I thought about replying. For another, I thought about quitting. Then I thought about Tom, about the look in the CFO's eyes when I said the word fail, about the fact that I wasn't wrong, I was just inconvenient. So I did what inconvenient people do best. I worked. I pulled up the system architecture, cross-checked every endpoint they'd asked about, and started building something I'd wanted to show for months. A kill switch module the client could own. A literal safeguard against us. If anything went wrong with our servers, they could isolate and reroute themselves without waiting for our engineers to wake up. It was risky. I was essentially arming the customer to survive without us, but it was real trust. At 9:40, I called Tom. He answered on the second ring. "You're not supposed to be calling me, are you?" "Depends who you ask. You sound calm." "I'm past anger. You got 10 minutes?" He hesitated, then said, "Make it 15. We met in a quiet glass pod near the lobby. No suits, no slides. I brought only a notebook and a marker. "Okay," I said, uncapping it. "Let's draw your world first." I sketched his architecture. Networks, dependencies, fail points. He corrected me twice. Then I drew ours. The good, the bad, the parts that made us fragile. Here's the truth, I said. If we go down, you're blind for maybe 10 minutes. But if we integrate this, I circled a new node. You can cut us off instantly and still process local batches. No middleman. Tom watched me silent. Then, why are you showing me this? It kills your own leverage. Because leverage doesn't build trust. Transparency does. You don't need me to make you dependent. You need me to make you secure. He stared for a long moment, then nodded slowly. You're either insane or the only person who gets it. We stayed another hour, walking through contingencies. He called in his security lead, a no-nonsense woman named Priya, who listened like a prosecutor. When we finished, she said, "You're telling us your product's weak spots. You realize we could use this to negotiate down the price." "You could," I said, "or you could use it to make sure it's worth every dollar." She smiled, not kindly, but approvingly. "You're not like the others." Before they left, Tom asked one question. "What do you want from this?" I hesitated, then said it straight. "I want to lead the account. No middle layers, no optics. If we're going to fix this, it has to be real." He nodded once. "Let me see what I can do." When they left, I sat there staring at the whiteboard. Names, arrows, red circles. It looked like chaos, but it felt like clarity. At 3:17, my phone buzzed again. "Greg." "Where the hell are you?" "Across the street." "Lauren's furious. She says you went rogue." "Did she mention the client asked for me?" "Tom?" "Him and Priya." There was silence on the line. Then Greg sighed. "Look, man, I can't protect you from this. She's already talking to HR." I smiled faintly. "Then you might want to protect her." At 4:22, Tom sent an email. Subject: Updated proposal terms. Confidential. Attached, a term sheet. Line 14. Account lead, Thomas last name. Non-transferable without client consent. One clause, one message. Either they trusted me, or they didn't get the deal. I read it twice, exhaled slowly, and hit forward to Greg with no subject, no comment, just the attachment. 5 minutes later, the typing bubbles appeared. Then, "What did you do?" I stared at the screen for a long time, the hotel light flickering across the glass, and typed back. "I told the truth, and someone listened." They wanted optics. The client wanted outcomes. By the time I walked into the final meeting, the air itself felt different. Still corporate, still polite, but charged, like the static before a storm. Lauren stood at the front of the boardroom, poised and perfect. White blazer crisp enough to cut paper. Greg was there too, pretending not to sweat. I took my seat quietly at the far end. I hadn't been invited. Again. But Tom's message had been clear. If you're not in the room, the deal's not happening. The CFO entered last, a tall man with the kind of silence that makes people straighten their backs. He dropped his folder on the table and looked around the room. Then he said, without preamble, "We'll proceed on one condition. He leads the account." He pointed at me. Lauren froze mid-smile. "Excuse me." The CFO didn't raise his voice. "You heard me. If this contract is going to last 5 years, we want him as our point of contact. We're not negotiating that." The only sound in the room was the soft tick of the projector cooling fan. Lauren's hand fluttered once toward her hair, then fell. She turned to Greg like maybe he'd save her. He didn't. I stayed still, calm. No victory grin, no gloating, just listening. Lauren recovered enough to smile. Thin, polite, breaking at the edges. "Of course, we'll need to review internal staffing structures, but—" "You'll review whatever you need?" the CFO said. "We'll wait." That was it. The entire power dynamic of the company collapsed in one line. Greg cleared his throat. "Thomas has done incredible work behind the scenes. We'll formalize his lead role immediately." The CFO nodded. "Good. Let's sign." It was done before anyone really realized it. A $1.2 million contract, 3 months of political games, and a single truth-teller sitting at the end of the table, who wasn't supposed to speak. After the meeting, Tom shook my hand. Hard. "Told you I'd get it done," he said. I just smiled. "You did." When the clients left, silence settled like dust. Lauren gathered her papers with surgical precision. "Congratulations," she said, voice tight. "You got what you wanted." I shook my head. "No, we got what we needed." She didn't answer. She just walked out, heels clicking down the marble hallway like punctuation marks in a language I'd stopped speaking. That afternoon, HR called. "Internal alignment," they said. Lauren was being transitioned to a strategic advisory role. Greg offered a careful apology, the kind that comes pre-approved by legal. "You understand," he said. There was pressure from above. Optics. I told him I did understand. Then I turned off my phone. I walked out of the building and into the noise of the city. It was late afternoon, sunlight bending off the glass, people rushing to be somewhere more important than here. I stopped at a men's store on the corner and bought a new tie, navy blue. Clean, simple, sharp. When I got home, I hung it in the closet. Then after a long minute, I took it off the hanger and dropped it in the drawer. Polish is for shoes. I'll keep the substance. Later that night, I texted my dad, first time in weeks. "It went through?" He replied with a single word. Proud. I sat in the dark for a while, staring at that word. It didn't feel like triumph. It felt like balance. Like the scale had finally stopped tilting toward the people who mistake shine for value. Somewhere in the distance, my phone buzzed again. Greg, probably, or HR, or someone trying to draft the next narrative. I didn't check. I'd already written my own.